Hello students, in this video we are going to do the reading and explanation of your fourth story, The Hearts and Hands by O. Henry. Now first of all we'll do about the writer, and when we talk about O. Henry's real name is William Sidney Potter. O. Henry was the pen name that he has taken. Pen name is basically not a real name, but it is a name taken only for the sake of putting it up with your creative work, maybe your paintings, maybe your writing. Especially the pen name is taken by the writers, so that with that particular name they usually write the stories. Now one of the important thing that you can write about O. Henry is that he is a writer who has written many stories, but with a proper style of very nice description of the entire scene and taking you out to a particular you can say direction, and certainly at the end you find that it is totally a contrasting ending to the story, a surprise ending that takes you with surprise that the story is totally in a different way now when it comes to an end. And the same thing he has done in this story also, The Hearts and Hands. We are believed that one of the major character is the policeman, but at the end we come to know that he was not the policeman, but rather he was the convict, and he was arrested by the other person who was the real policeman. So we'll quickly read this particular chapter and then I'll explain you the chapter accordingly. So it says, at Denver, there was influx of passengers into the coaches of the eastbound B&M Express. In one coach there sat a very pretty young woman dressed in elegant taste and surrounded by all the luxuries, comforts of an experienced traveler. So here we are told about a particular train which is called as the eastbound B&M Express. And in this particular train, the entire train was full of you can say a huge number of people coming there, passengers. But in one of the coaches there was a particular lady who was sitting there, and this lady was sitting in a very elegant taste, nicely dressed, elegant taste she had in her dress, and all the surroundings next to her, everything was very elegant, and it seemed that as if she is an experienced traveler. She knows how to keep things for a particular journey. Among the newcomers, who were two young men, one of handsome presence with a bold, frank countenance and manner, the other a ruffled, glum-faced person, heavily built and roughly dressed. The two were handcuffed together. So there were two different people who came over here in this particular coach, and as they came along with the other crowd, they were walking down the aisle. So these two men, one was a handsome man of a nice countenance, whereas the other was a glum-faced person who seemed to be a heavy-built man. Both of them were handcuffed to each other. As they came over here, as they passed down the aisle of the coach, the only vacant seat offered was a reversed one facing the attractive young women. Here the linked couple seated themselves. The young woman's glance fell upon them with a distant, swift disinterest. Then, with a lovely smile brightening her countenance and a tender pink tingeing her rounded cheeks, she held out a little grey-gloved hand. When she spoke, her voice, full, sweet, and deliberate, proclaimed that its owner was accustomed to speak and be heard. So here these two people, when they came in the coach, they walked down the aisle and could not find any other place but a seat which was in reverse, that means in a totally opposite direction to this young woman. And they sat over there, and this woman, in a very disinterested way, she looked at the two newcomers, and when she looked at them at just a glance, she realized that this person who was sitting over there is her known, or is an acquaintance to her. So suddenly that disinterest changed into a smile, and it was her cheeks were pink, and she was happy to see this man. Here this particular slight descriptions are also they given to show that this lady is interested in this particular man. That is why she is blushing. It is given a tender pink tingeing around her rounded cheeks. So she was happy and blushing looking at this young man. And then she speaks, and when she spoke, her voice was very beautiful. It seemed as if it is not a very strong voice, but it was good, in a way spoken in such a way that this lady was always in the habit of being heard. Whenever she spoke, everybody stopped talking and heard or listened to what she was saying. She said, Well, Mr. Easton, if you will make me speak first, I suppose I must. Don't you ever recognize old friends when you meet them in the West? She says, oh, Mr. Easton, we have met over here and in the West. And is it the custom over here in the West that when you meet the old friends, you do not wish them or you do not recognize them in the West? Because they probably are from the eastern part of the country. The younger man roused himself sharply at the sound of her voice, seemed to struggle with a slight embarrassment, which he threw off instantly, and then clasped her fingers with his left hand. So here we are given that this man was startled in a way. Maybe he was pretending or maybe in reality, but he was startled by the sudden conversation by this young lady, and then he was a little embarrassed that he did not realize or he did not see the lady. Maybe he was pretending to be embarrassed because he must have been ignoring him. We know why it was. So he simply said, he just was embarrassed, and then he clasped her fingers and he held her hand with his left hand. The reason was because his right hand was handcuffed. So he says, "It's Miss Fairchild," he said with a smile. "I'll ask you to excuse the other hand. It's otherwise engaged just at present." He slightly raised his right hand, bound at the wrist by the shining bracelet, to the left one of his companion. So he says, if you could just excuse me, right hand, and he showed his right hand, and it had a shining wrist, bracelet on his wrist, and this bracelet was not a bracelet, indeed it was the handcuff, which was making him bound to the other man, who was the policeman, or you can say who was the other glum-faced man sitting next to him. Given the untidy, ruffled man, he was the man. The glad look in the girl's eyes slowly changed to a bewildered horror. So it was the look in the eyes of this girl. She was very happy to see her old friend, but now suddenly it changed into a bewildered horror. So the lady was horrified to see that the man she is talking to is basically handcuffed. Most probably he is a criminal. The glow faded from her cheeks. Her lips parted in a vague, relaxing distress. Easton, with a little laugh as if amused, was about to speak again when the other forestalled him. The glum-faced man had been watching the girl's countenance and with veiled glances from his keen eyes. So he was about to say something when he saw that the expressions and all the features of the girl is changing. She is quite scared and she is quite in an alarming situation. Mr. Easton was about to say something, but suddenly the other glum-faced man, who was sitting over there and watching keenly the expressions of this lady, he looked at her and he tried to manage the situation, and he said, "You'll excuse me for speaking, miss, but I see you're acquainted with the marshal here. If you'll ask him to speak a word for me when we get to the pen, he'll do it, and it'll make things easier for me there. He's taking me to Leavenworth prison. It's 7 years off for counterfeiting." So he says, this glum-faced man, that ma'am, excuse me, I think you know this particular gentleman, the marshal over here. He's taking me to the prison, and if you could just if you ask him, he might listen to you and write something good about me, so that if I have a good report about myself from the marshal, then in the prison I might have a little shorter span of the punishment, because he's taking me to the Leavenworth prison, where I have 7 years of imprisonment for counterfeiting, for bluff, and for doing some mischief. So here he basically manages the situation and says that I am the convict and he is the marshal taking me there. If you could just recommend my case to him, he might write some good report for me, and that would shorten my prison imprisonment. "Oh," said the girl with a deep breath and returning color. "So that is what you are doing out here, a marshal." So she is now satisfied. Okay, she's not talking to a convict, but rather she is talking to a marshal. "My dear Miss Fairchild," said Easton calmly, "I had to do something. Money has a way of taking wings unto itself, and you know it takes money to keep step with our crowd in Washington. So he says, my dear Miss Fairchild, I had to do something. मुझे यहाँ कुछ काम करना ही था to earn a living, because whatever money I had, money has a strange habit of, it has wings, it flies away from your hand, and so you are always in desperate need of to have money so that you can keep up the things going on. And that is why I had to take this job. I had to be a ambassador over here. I had to take this job, although it is not as great as a job of an ambassador. I became a marshal. So why do you think he has said it is not as great a job as marshal, as great a job as an ambassador? Because probably he has nothing to do with ambassador, but we assume that this lady whom he had liked earlier, or whom she must have been in a relationship earlier with, must have been an ambassador, and that is why Mr. Easton is saying कि मैं उस ambassador के बराबर मेरी position नहीं है, but still I am at a good position of a marshal, and that is what he is trying to impress the lady, that your boyfriend, your friend earlier who was an ambassador was a great position. I am although not that great a person in that great position. But here again this lady gives an indication that she has some feelings for Mr. Easton, and she says, the ambassador, said the girl warmly, doesn't call anymore. That ambassador does not call me anymore. He doesn't have any words with me now. He needn't ever have done so. You ought to know that. And so now you are one of these dashing Western heroes, and you ride and shoot and go into all kinds of dangers. That's different from the Washington life. You have been missed from the old crowd. So he says he never calls, and it is nothing, he would have never even done so. So it's that means she is saying that Mr. Easton was aware of the situation of between this lady Miss Fairchild and that particular ambassador. Then she says, but now you have become a dashing hero because you are on the horseback, shooting guns and chasing the convicts and the dacoits. So you are the one leading a very Western life, and this is not something totally a life of Washington. It is different from the Washington life, and you are the one who is always missed from the crowd. The girl's eyes, fascinated, went back, whitening a little, to rest upon the glittering handcuffs. Every now and then when she was talking to this young man, she was having her focus on that bracelet, on that handcuff, and she was distracted in a way while having a conversation because of that handcuff. Don't you worry about them, miss, said the other man. All marshals handcuff themselves to their prisoners to keep them from getting away. Mr. Easton knows his business. Will we see you again soon in Washington? Asked the girl. Not soon, I think, said Easton. My butterfly days are over, I fear. So while this lady was always bothered with the bracelet or with the handcuff, the glum-faced man tried to remove her fears and told her that, madam, you don't have to worry about these handcuffs. It is one of the usual things. Every particular prisoner is handcuffed to the marshal, and so Mr. Marshal knows his business, and he has that is why bound himself to me with the handcuff. And then the lady is once again consoled, and Miss Fairchild asks Mr. Easton that, are you not going to come to the Washington anyway soon? So he says, no, my butterfly days are over. His butterfly days are over means now he is not free to go anywhere, he is busy. That simply is assumed by Miss Fairchild, that Mr. Easton means that he is busy with his job of being a marshal. Whereas Mr. Easton was telling the truth, he was not free because he was being arrested and taken to Leavenworth prison for 7 years. So in both the ways, it worked out the situation, whatever the comment Mr. Easton said. I love the West, said the girl irrelevantly. Her eyes were shining softly. She looked away out of the car window. She began to speak truly and simply without the gloss of style and manner. Mama and I spent the summer in Denver. She went home a week ago because father was slightly ill. I could live and be happy in the West. I think the air here agrees with me. Money isn't everything, but people always misunderstand things and remain stupid. Now this paragraph can be termed as an eye-opening revelation or accepting of the feelings by Miss Fairchild for Mr. Easton. She is giving all the indications that she loves Mr. Easton and she is ready to be with him and she says, first of all, Mr. Easton is in West, and he says, I love the West. The air over here agrees with me. That means I am good enough to stay over here. I can live over here because my mother and father are away. They have gone, but I am the only one living here, as this place suits me. And money isn't everything. I am not just going to be after money. I don't want anyone who is a very rich person. That means not an ambassador. I can even go with a marshal. That is what she means. And so she gives an indication to Mr. Easton and says, some people do not understand such things, and that is why they remain stupid. They think that the girls will only go after money, and they will only think for people on huge posts like that of an ambassador. But they don't realize that ladies do love some men, and for them they can even sacrifice money or the things. They are not the entire or the whole thing that a person wants. So that is how she gives a proper indication to Mr. Easton about her love, or you can say it is like a love confession of Miss Fairchild. Say, Mr. Marshall, growled the glum-faced man, this isn't quite fair. I am needing a drink and haven't had a smoke all day. Haven't you talked long enough? Take me in the smoker now, won't you? I'm half dead for a pipe. The bound travellers rose to their feet, Easton with the same slow smile on his face. Now, while this was happening at that time, suddenly the glum-faced man said, Mr. Marshall, please, you have been talking over here for so long. It is unfair. Now I request you to please take me to the smoker, because I am dying for a pipe. Pipe means the smoke pipe. And I need to have a particular smoke before you take me to the prison. So that is how both of them, they decide to leave the place, and Mr. Easton asks Miss Fairchild to bid him farewell. He does have the same smile with him. The bound travelers then started moving from that particular aisle to the smoker room. Smoker room is a small chamber in the coach where only the people, those who want to smoke, will go. I can't deny a petition for tobacco, he says lightly. It's the one friend of the unfortunate. Goodbye, Miss Fairchild. Duty calls, you know. He held out his hand for a farewell. So he says, it is my duty, and for an unfortunate man who has been arrested, this smoke is the only last hope and help and a friend for them to support them in this condition. So I'll have to agree to his request, and I'll go along with him. Goodbye to you. It is my duty. So the duty calls. That is why I'm bidding you farewell. It's too bad you are not going east, she said, reclothing herself with manner and style. But you must go on to Leavenworth, I suppose. Yes, said Easton, I must go to Leavenworth. The two men sidled down the aisle into the smoker. So she says, it is very sad that you are not coming to the Washington to the east. Sorry, not Washington. You are not coming to the east. But I guess you are supposed to perform your duty in Leavenworth prison. There you are going. So Mr. Easton said, yes, I am going to the Leavenworth prison. And then both the two men, Mr. Easton and the glum-faced man, they both started walking down the aisle towards the smoker room. As they are gone and this lady is back to her normal, same elegant style, then at that time there were two passengers who were overhearing this entire conversation. The two passengers in a seat nearby had heard most of the conversation. Said one of them, that Marshall's a good sort of chap. Some of these Western fellows are all right. Pretty young to hold an office like that, isn't he? Asked the other. So the two passengers who heard, one of them said that Marshall was a good fellow, and I guess all people over here are not as bad as we might think. Some of them are really good, like that particular Marshall, who was a good fellow. So the other person said, but yes, being good also, besides being good, he is quite young to hold that post, isn't that? So the first person says, young? Exclaimed the first speaker. Why? Oh, didn't you catch on? Say, did you ever know an officer to handcuff a prisoner to his right hand? He said, why? Don't you understand? Didn't you get it? That have you ever seen a particular policeman who would handcuff his right hand to the prisoner's left hand? Because you would be doing every different sort of work with your right hand. That is why the marshal always keeps his right hand free and occupies the convict's right hand and binds it with his left hand. So that is how he says, always a marshal will handcuff a prisoner with his left hand and keep his right hand free. And over here, the man who was talking to the lady was the one who had his right hand bound, because he even greeted Miss Fairchild with his left hand. We are given that indication. And the other man, the glum-faced man, had his right hand free and the left hand bound to this man. So that gave that the glum-faced man was the real marshal, and this particular fellow was the convict. So that even this glum-faced man was consoling and giving all the clarifications to Miss Fairchild. That also sums it up, that he was the marshal and was trying to save the situation for the convict. So with this, we come to the end of the story. I hope you've understood it. Go through it and you will understand it. It's a short and a simple story for you to understand. So we'll come to the end of this module.